for joining us at Dream City Online. Stay connected by downloading the Dream City Omaha app. And don't forget to subscribe for all our latest videos.
Hey guys, welcome back to Emotional Intelligence, where we've been journeying through how to steward your soul. In keeping with the same pattern that we've established already, which is in 1 week, I'll introduce to you a skill of emotional intelligence. Following week, I will walk out or really unpack some practical strategies on how you can grow in that particular skill. So we've already covered the first skill, which was self-awareness. We walked through that. We looked at what it looks like and how we can grow in becoming self-aware. And then last week, we introduced this idea and said that, self-awareness is not just for awareness sake. I quoted the beloved Mr. Rogers, who says that everything mentionable is manageable. And really what this means is that the purpose of us growing in our self-awareness is not for awareness sake alone, but so that we can learn to manage those things. And so we introduced this second skill of the personal competencies, which is the skill of self-management. Now, while I want you to understand that as we progress into learning how to manage, I want you to be aware of the fact that as you have become aware of these things and you start managing some of them, you're going to continue to become aware. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, I would submit to you that if you stop becoming aware of new things about yourself or stop becoming aware of new things about the people in your life, you've stopped growing. And so I don't ever want you to get this idea that, I'm going to be done. I can check self-awareness off my box. Now I'm moving into self-management. It very much is this cyclical progress or journey of growth. And so we're going to become aware, we're going to manage. We're going to become aware, we're going to manage. And it becomes more of a lifestyle than it does just a course that I took and checked off of my box. Now, while it's true with the strategies of self-awareness that there are a lot of them that are very much proactive and some that are reactive, it's especially true when it comes to the strategies for self-management. And so as we begin to outline some strategies today to grow in the skill of self-management, you'll notice that some of them are very much reactive, meaning I'm going to apply this in the moment, and a lot of them are proactive. And so they're setting me up for success as I'm growing in the management of my emotional intelligence. It's worth saying out loud that management does require discipline, right? It's why not everybody at your workplace is a manager, because it takes work. It takes a certain amount of effort. Hebrews 12:11 reminds us that no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. In fact, it's painful. But here's what the word says, is that afterwards there's going to be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. You guys, if we become aware of unhealthy patterns and we don't do anything to change them or to manage them, all we do is reinforce them. So yes, it's going to take discipline in order to manage those things, but don't be afraid of some discipline. The following strategies that we're going to talk about are designed to implement that discipline that I just mentioned. It's going to help you become a better self-manager. None of the strategies that I'm ever going to give you in this class are going to be an exhaustive list. There's so many, but I promise you, if you start with the ones that you're learning here, you will absolutely grow in these skills, thus growing your emotional intelligence. So without further ado, let's unpack this and start looking at some practical ways that we can grow in our management. The first strategy that we're going to look at is this idea that we need to commit to identifying and understanding our standard of measurement. Commit to identifying and understanding our standard of measurement. To really give this context, let's go back and understand or revisit, if you will, the definition of what it means to be a self-manager. Now, self-management is our ability to regulate our responses to our emotions, to situations, to people, right? That key or that operative word being regulate. We learned last week that to regulate means to make adjustments according to a certain standard to ensure accuracy of operation. Okay? A standard of measurement is the standard by which we measure success or accuracy of operation. Each one of us is going to have to commit to not only identifying, okay, what is that standard, but commit to really gaining a comprehensive understanding of what that standard is. Because without a comprehensive understanding of it, it's going to be really difficult for us to determine what the right adjustment is in that particular situation. Think about it like this. Imagine that let's say that you wanted to cook something. You were going to bake a dessert, and you were given a recipe with some instructions on how to make this particular dessert, okay? And so you start reading the instructions, and it says to pour 3 of flour into 2 of milk and add 1 of sugar. What? 3 what? 2 what? 1 what? There's no standard of measurement. You want me to pour 3 cups, 3 tablespoons, teaspoons? And to further illustrate this point, let's say that, okay, maybe you determined, in fact, it was cups, but maybe the measurement of a cup is new to you. So do I just grab any cup out of the cupboard? Will a large mug do? Do I get a tiny shot glass? So you begin to understand the difference here. It would be no different if you were trying to build something and said, okay, well, you're going to take 4 of plywood and you're going to fasten that to 3 of the drywall. I'm using terms I have no idea what they mean, but you get the point here. Without an accurate standard of measurement, we don't know what adjustments need to be made. I remember traveling in foreign countries where the speed limit is different. I'm used to miles per hour. They use kilometers. Well, I don't know what the conversion rate is. I remember going to the Dominican Republic, and they had a different currency, and I'm out here making it rain because I have no idea how many of my US dollars are equivalent to their pesos. And so we begin to see and understand how important not only is it that I identify, here's the standard of measurement that I'm going to be making adjustments according to, but now I've really got to begin to unpack and understand what this standard of measurement fully entails. Because the standard that you choose to live by, it is ultimately what you choose to die by. And I know that sounds a little, maybe catastrophic and dramatic. But listen, if you choose to live a life where the standard of measurement and then the standard for every decision you're going to make is happiness, here's what's going to happen is that the moment that fleeting emotion goes away, you're going to be paralyzed. You won't know what to do during trials or storms. If you choose to live with comfort, as I just don't want to be uncomfortable, you're never going to grow. Other humanistic standards, and we have so many of these, things like success, attention, approval of others, acceptance, pleasure, all of these promise the same disappointment and confusion, and here's why. The adjustments for those are always changing, and this creates chaos and confusion in our mental and emotional state. I'm going to assume, and maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm assuming that because you are taking a biblical class on emotional intelligence, that for you, your standard is in fact Jesus Christ, right? And so what that means is that for us as followers of Jesus, the standard of measurement, according to Ephesians 4:13, is in fact Jesus. And the beauty of having Jesus as my standard is that he anchors my soul, meaning that he's constant, right? He's not changing all the time. The Bible says that, he's not changing like those shifting shadows. We get to know Jesus in and through his word. And in order for us to identify in our lives what adjustments need to be made, we're going to have to commit to gaining an understanding of our standard of measurement through the studying of that word, of God's word. When you choose a standard of measurement, but you don't take the time to really understand it, like I said earlier, it's always going to lead to confusion and frustration. And I think this is where a lot of Christians get stuck, because we have this religious appetite for a relational God. We just want the boxes to check off. Tell me yes, tell me no, and even then we want to go rogue. But listen, as we commit to getting to know him, I get to know his character. And the more I get to know his character, the more that I trust him. And the more that I trust him, the easier it is to love him. And the more that I love him, the more that I want him more than anything else. And at this point, we begin to see that my standard of measurement ceases to be this empty religion that I'm trying really, really hard to live up to. And instead, it becomes this beautiful relationship with a God that so completely fills me that I don't want to go back to my life before those adjustments. These adjustments are not browbeaten into me, but they usher in the fullness of life that I was created for. I choose God not because I have to, but because I want to. And every other standard of measurement in your life will set you up for failure, and here's why. You were not created for them. The Bible says that you were made by God and for God. In Psalm 18:30, it says, God's way is perfect. Maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're still having this negotiation and you're still letting God know that you've got some better ideas. But according to his word, his way is perfect. All of his promises prove true, and he is a shield for all who look to him for protection. The problem is that we're still so busy being our own protectors and our own defenders. And while doing that, again, we're disregarding the standard that we were created for. One last thing on this idea of a standard of measurement. Listen, I told you, you were made by God and for God, which is why unapologetically, when I'm teaching emotional intelligence, I'm going to teach you that the standard that you were created for is the standard of him, is the standard that's revealed in and through his word. But when you try to adjust to a standard that you were not created for, here's what happens. Disorder creeps in, right? When you try and create order in something by adjusting it to a standard it wasn't created for, disorder is an inevitability. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in every 8 people in the world is suffering from some form of mental disorder. Sadly, in the U.S., it's even higher. It's about 1 in every 5 people. In 2022, nearly 60 million Americans were suffering from some form of mental or emotional disorder. This includes things like depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, PTSD, any kind of eating disorder, neurodevelopmental disorders. The gamut is very broad. But 1 in 5, you guys, that's so much disorder. And I would suggest to you, it's because we're trying to create order according to the wrong standard. Mental disorder affects people of every age, every race, every culture, socioeconomic background, you name it. It's indiscriminate in the way that it affects us. But here's something crazy. According to the Barna Research Group, the people that are least likely to suffer from mental disorder are practicing Christians. Let me say that again. While mental illness is an indiscriminate, equal opportunity offender, if you will, the population, the people group, least likely to suffer severe mental disorder are practicing Christians. According to Barna, a practicing Christian is defined as someone who is a committed member of a church and someone who actively lives out their faith. I do think it's important to differentiate, like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I know God. I got baptized when I was a baby, whatever that is. No, a practicing Christian kind of levels up or weeds out what we would like to think of that. Practicing Christian, someone who's a committed member of their church and who actively lives out their faith. Now, listen, I'm not trying to minimize even hardships within the church. And to be clear, to be a practicing Christian does not mean that we're exempt from the hardships of life or loss or suffering. But what I am submitting to you is that with an absolute standard of measurement, a tried and true, infallible standard of measurement to anchor our lives to, research shows and points to, on all accounts, lower rates of mental disorder among this people group. As a practicing Christian, the job of a self-manager is not to adjust the standard. It's to let the standard adjust you. I know I've belabored this first point, this first strategy, but I've done so for a reason, because every other strategy that we're going to unpack throughout the remainder of today's class is going to hinge on and refer back to this idea of our standard of measurement. It's such an integral component of how we execute regulation in our lives. So with this understanding that I am committing to, number one, I'm identifying what is my standard of measurement, and not only do I know what it is, but I am going to commit to the discipline of really gaining a comprehensive understanding. Okay, so that means it's not just a people group I affiliate with, but I am living this out. I'm going deeper in my understanding of this every single day. So with that foundation, the next strategy that I'm going to do as I aim to regulate my emotions is I'm going to identify the problem and the adjustment, okay? So again, if I have a clearly defined standard of measurement, that's where we begin, but that's by no means the end. Like, I can have that, but if I don't make any applications, nothing changes, okay? Now we have to roll up our sleeves and get to work making some adjustments. My standard of measurement is going to be what defines both the problem and the adjustment that's necessary for me to operate with accuracy. It's going to do me no good to recognize that snitch list that we've been talking about. Here's my emotions, here's the correlating behaviors. If I cannot further evaluate, well, why is this a problem in my life? Go back to those strategies for self-awareness. Well, what fruit is it producing? If there's constant chaos, discord, that there's fighting all the time, there's no sense of unity, there's bitterness, there's hatred. Okay, I can identify that now because I have a standard. Oh, this is not healthy. Remember when we talked about the difference between normal and healthy? Maybe those behaviors have been normal, but now because I've committed to understanding my standard, I recognize, oh, this is a problem. So I'm going to identify that problem. You guys, this is going to take time. Okay, and the things that I am becoming aware of in this season of my life, I wasn't ready for 10 years ago. And so be careful not to project what you're learning and the problems that you're recognizing in your life onto other people. Your goal right now is to focus on you. But this takes time, patience as I'm growing in my understanding of my standard, because emotions are the byproducts of our thoughts, the influencers of our feelings. This is very much going to be a multifaceted approach. I have to identify the problems not only in the emotions, but in the thoughts that preceded those, the thoughts that originated, the choices that followed. This might feel overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a problem with my thinking, there's a problem with my feeling, there's a problem with my choosing. Yes, there is, but listen, based on the dynamic of the relationship of all of those, because we already talked about the interdependence, there's very much going to be a domino effect when we start making adjustments. The more that I think according to my standard, the more I'm going to feel according to my standard. My feelings will reflect those thoughts. My behaviors are going to reflect that influence as well. The more I choose those influenced behaviors, the more reinforced those thoughts come. And so again, it will have a very symbiotic relationship. Don't let it intimidate you because it is so multifaceted. When it comes to identifying the problem, Typically, it has less to do with the what and more to do with the why. It's very difficult to adjust what I'm feeling if I don't understand why I'm feeling that way. For example, let's say that if I know that when I feel lonely, I tend to look at porn. I can look at porn as the problem, but until I understand that the reason that I look at porn is when I feel lonely is because I was created for intimacy, porn offers a counterfeit form of that intimacy, low threat of rejection. The more likely I'm going to be to make adjustments centered around simply not watching porn instead of actually learning healthy ways to satisfy that need for intimacy. The behaviors, remember, those are the tells, but we've got to figure out why, because if I know the why, I'm going to be able to execute strategies for management that are more sustainable. If I know that when I feel inadequate, I tend to overcommit myself. Okay, I can identify my ever-growing to-do list as the problem, but until I understand that the reason that I overcommit, the reason I say yes to everything is because I'm afraid of telling people no, because I have a fear of rejection, my adjustments are going to be based on hours in the day versus gaining and understanding the fact that my value is not based on what I do, but who I am. And I could give you examples of these for days. But again, when it comes to identifying the problem, let the what be the tell, but then let's dig a little bit deeper and figure out the why. Because once we understand our emotions are indicators, we stop seeing the emotion as the problem, rather it's a clue to the problem, okay? With an understanding of the actual problem, now, like I said, I can identify some adjustments that are going to be more sustainable and more likely to produce the results that I'm actually looking for. You won't always nail the adjustment the first time, and that is completely okay. I don't want you to be discouraged by that. I don't want that to cause you to throw in the towel, throw up your hands, forget it, I tried this. No, take every single one of those as a learning opportunity. Think about it like this. It's okay to adjust the adjustment, okay? Use your newfound self-awareness and strategies for such to identify what's working, what's not, what's producing the desired fruit, and what's not. With this also, don't expect immediate results. Feelings don't change overnight, at least not the sustainable kind. And it's for this reason that feelings, emotions should not ever be used as a measurement for success. Okay? So we're going to identify the problem, we're going to identify the adjustment, and we're going to start to apply those. As we start to apply those, our next strategy is going to be to set some measurable goals with timelines. We're going to set some measurable goals, with timelines. My growing self-awareness and my established standard of measurement have now created this opportunity for me to measure growth. We can have all the goals in the world, but if we don't put some accountability behind them, we're never going to know if we've met them. We do this by creating goals that are centered around the adjustments. I've identified, here's adjustments that need to be made. Now, what kind of goals can I put in place? I want to support this goal by creating downtimes. Listen, let's say that we're going to set a goal to, maybe I've realized that I'm not getting enough sleep, okay? And so I've become aware of the fact that when I don't get enough sleep, I'm irritable, I have a hard time focusing. So I'm going to set a goal of going to bed at a specific night, at a specific time each night for a month straight. I'm going to support this goal by putting downtimes in my phone. I'm going to commit to an hour of relaxing before I go to bed. If I become aware that I'm prone to self-medicating the moment that I feel anxious, which might relieve some of the symptoms of my anxiety, but it doesn't help address that underlying cause. Maybe I'm going to set a goal of giving myself at least 1 hour of leaning into that discomfort, deconstructing that anxiety before I even reach for that pill bottle. I'm going to support that goal by journaling what I'm feeling, by asking some questions. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Okay? Again, when we're setting goals, we've got to be honest about where we're starting. Romans 12:3 encourages us. He says, listen, don't think that you're better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourself. The more willing that we are to be honest about where we're starting, the more likely we are to be able to set realistic goals for ourselves, okay? So as we are setting goals, they need to be realistic and they need to be achievable. We want to set timelines. Again, that's going to create and support some accountability around that. Goals work best when they are written down so that they can be referred back to. They should be challenging, but also achievable. I don't want it to be so easy that I didn't have to put in any work, because in the second I do, again, I'm going to quit or I'm going to revert backwards. Don't be overzealous though, okay? Set 1 or 2 goals a month and regularly assess your progress. If you do this consistently, you will start to see changes. As you start to see changes, growth in this area. Growth is a natural creator of momentum. But again, a lot of times we don't know we're growing because we never wrote these things down, because we weren't honest about where we were starting. So don't be afraid to set a goal. I remember the longest time I didn't want to set a goal because what if I failed? Well, then I just created this failure vortex anyways, because then I was just not doing anything. So set some goals, measurable goals, put some timelines around them, write them down, and refer back to them often. As we have goals, here's what I need you to know. Technically, you can grow on your own with those goals. They do not have to include anybody else. But what I have found is that this next strategy, when we seek out and maintain accountability, there is an added layer of, I don't want to say pressure, encouragement, motivation. Motivation is probably the best word. There's an added layer of motivation towards that goal. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 says this. It says, 2 people are better off than one. They can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other one can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone, that one's in real trouble. I cannot overemphasize the value in finding someone to be accountable to. The greatest leaders are not the ones who have to have accountability brought to them, but they're the ones who they themselves seek out that accountability. And I would go even to say that the healthiest people, right? It's not the person who has to have someone come to them and be like, hey, I found out this is what's going on with you. But it's that person who is self-aware, who's constantly self-evaluating, recognizing, this is an area I need to grow in, and I'm going to bring this to someone else so that if and when I do fall, I've got someone to help me back up. This means when I say that you are seeking out and maintaining accountability, though, you're not waiting for someone to come to you. Okay? And not even for, I asked them to be my accountability partner and they just never reached out. I was just talking with a gentleman recently who he's part of the AA program and came up to me and said, I got drunk last night. And I told my sponsor I got drunk last week and I told my sponsor and he hasn't reached out once. And so clearly I told him it's not his job to reach out to you. We want people to chase us down for our problems. It's your job. If you want to grow as a self-manager, you seek out that accountability. Not only seek it out once, but then you maintain that. You're setting up the coffee. You're sending the text. You're bringing things into the light that need to be brought into the light. Don't wait for somebody to come along. Hey, I would love to keep you accountable. I'd love to mentor you. Sometimes that happens, and it's great, but that is the exception, not the rule. Find someone who's managing their own life in a way that inspires them and ask them, hey, would you have time once a month to meet with me, to talk with me. Share your goals with them. Ask for feedback. Be humble enough to receive it. So we're going to seek out, we're going to maintain accountability. This next strategy is what I would refer to as staying in your lane. Stay in your lane. Emotional intelligence is not done in isolation, okay? The very premise of becoming emotionally intelligent requires a careful evaluation of not only myself, but the others that I'm in relationship with. It is of the utmost importance that in our evaluation, whether that is of me or of others, that I protect my standard of measurement. And can I tell you, the quickest and almost undisguisable way of changing your standard of measurement is to get caught in the trap of comparison. And we are all susceptible to this. But here's what you need to know is that the moment you start comparing any aspect of your life to those around you, you have inadvertently changed them to be your standard of measurement. And the trap of comparison promises to yield really one of two results: pride or insecurity. Pride or insecurity. My comparison's either going to leave me feeling superior to whoever I'm comparing myself to, or inferior. Both of these will create neurochemical chaos that is going to hinder the stewardship or the management of your soul. In Galatians chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, Paul says that we need to pay careful attention to our own work. What is he saying? Stay in your lane. When we pay attention to our own work, then we will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and we won't need to compare ourselves to anyone else. He says we are each responsible for our own conduct. When we start comparing, pride goes up and progress goes down. We become critical and judgmental, whether that is towards other people or towards ourselves. But the best way to guard your heart against this is to stay in your lane, to remember who you are, what you've been created for, what you've been called to. As you focus on your own growth, you're going to find that it's so much easier to champion those around you when you stop competing with them. So stay in your lane. The next strategy is to teach your thoughts to obey. Remember, I've now become aware of my thoughts. I've been mapping my thoughts. I've been leaning into my thoughts. But now I've got to teach those thoughts a couple of things, okay? Because comparison is not the only bait that tempts us into mental and emotional chaos. I think I told you in week 1 that the average person has about 5,000 to 8,000 conscious thoughts every single day, okay? Research shows, and I know we've already talked about this, but it bears repeating, that about every 10 seconds, we have what's known as a burst of consciousness, meaning that about 6 times a minute, I become aware of what I'm thinking about. Now, I can either take those thoughts captive, or those thoughts will take me captive. It is for this reason that Paul charged the believers in the church of Corinth to take every thought captive and teach it to obey Christ. You guys, the quickest way to an emotional hijacking is through unruly, unchecked terroristic thoughts. Thoughts that show up for the sole purpose of creating chaos and wreaking emotional havoc in our lives. These types of thoughts are different than difficult thoughts, right? My goal is not to make you mindless people who are incapable of critical thinking. Difficult thoughts, critical thinking, that's good for your brain. You should lean into those. That grows our capacity for emotional intelligence, really. And that provides us opportunities in so many facets to grow. The thoughts that I'm talking about usually show up in the form of accusations, doubt, or deception. Accusations, doubt, or deception. And really, if we look at it, this is the same strategy used by the enemy on Eve all the way back to the garden. Here we are some 2,000 years later, and we're falling for the same tactics. When we understand that an emotional hijacking starts in our thought life, it just re-emphasizes the importance of maintaining order when it comes to my thoughts. Now, that sounds so easy, right? Yeah, just get my thoughts in order. What does that look like practically, Angel? I want to walk you through just some different types of thoughts that we tend to have a hard time teaching to obey Jesus, okay? First one is racing or obsessive thoughts. Racing or obsessive thoughts are typically those thoughts that, again, it feels like they come at us just like an automatic rifle, an automatic assault rifle, if you will, because it really is this assault. Those are rooted in fear. And it's not necessarily fear in the form of terror, but more in the form of worry, insecurity, uncertainty. If you are overwhelmed or overstimulated, your brain can have a difficult time creating order. So one thought will lead to another, to another, to another, to another. Again, because I'm worrying about all these things. And it feels like there's no logical pattern or connection with these. And so in order to streamline racing thoughts, I would suggest to you, again, so practical, try writing them down, okay? Once you've written them down, look for patterns. Look for connections in these thoughts. This is going to create that thought map. It's going to have a beginning and an end. What are you doing? It's creating order. It's bringing clarity. If you can't write them out because you're maybe just in a hyperspastic mode, try talking them out, okay? Find somebody, let them know. Having some racing obsessive thoughts, I just need to process them out loud. I've not been able, it's okay to say that stuff out loud, you guys. Say it out loud. I just need to process these things out loud. Create a discipline of doing this. This is going to train your brain to more readily recognize patterns, allowing you to catch them sooner the next time. This is not going to be, again, one of those things that we do one time, especially if you're prone to the obsessive or excessive racing thoughts. This is going to take time. This takes discipline, but you will begin to see order in those thoughts. So that's racing or obsessive. Now, repeating thoughts. This can be, maybe it's not a barrage of thoughts all at once, but it's the same thought over and over and over. I almost feel like it creates a loop in your brain. One of the best ways to interrupt this loop is to say it out loud or to ask for feedback. If you've ever had a kid who just keeps saying the same thing over and over and over, simply interrupting that feedback for them, right? Here's what we're going to do. Here's when we're doing it. It interrupts that and it allows their brain to move on from that thought. Sometimes it's something I don't want to forget, something that, again, that I could be worrying about. You can set up assists for yourself. Put a note in your phone. Set a reminder in your phone. So now I can move it out of my conscious reality, but I know that I've got a safeguard in place so that's not going to be forgotten. If the repeated thought is rooted in a lie, whether that's about God, that's about you, that's about others or a situation, listen, the only way to interrupt that loop is with the truth of God's word. The truth that originated from your standard of measurement. So if there is a loop that goes through your mind, you're not enough, you're inadequate, whatever that loop is, you cannot interrupt that loop simply by putting a note in your phone. You're going to have to interrupt that. The only thing that interrupts the broadcast of deception is that of the truth of the living God. Let's talk about intrusive thoughts, okay? These can be the most difficult to manage because intrusive thoughts are often tied to painful life experiences that did in fact happen, that were in fact painful, and very much left a real impact on your mental and emotional health. Dealing with intrusive thoughts begins with the process of deconstruction. Now, that's a word that I use a lot, whether it's in this class, other classes, just general language. But simply trying not to think those thoughts or feelings is just a form of suppression. And we've already learned that suppression is not a form of healthy self-management. And so what does it mean to deconstruct? How do I do that? Okay. Deconstruction is simply the process of isolating one thought at a time, right? There may be this whole pattern of thinking, pattern of behaving. It almost feels like a rut, or what it really is it's a neural pathway that you've traveled so many times that it's built into who you are. And so to interrupt that, we have to deconstruct it. We do that by isolating one thought at a time, okay? I'm gonna get this one thought. What is the thought that I am aware of in this neural pathway, in this rut? Okay, now I'm gonna take this one thought that I'm aware of, okay, and I'm gonna test it with truth. This goes back to my standard. I have to test its credibility. To deconstruct an intrusive thought, it can be helpful, though it's not always necessary to determine its origin. What does that mean? It means when's the first time I remember having this thought? Because typically, the longer that a thought persists, the more power, the more influence that it has, and the harder that it can be to deconstruct. Because again, patterns represent power. And so the longer that something's been a part of me, the more real that thing will feel. So, and really, the way that we understand that is to understand that when you think, when you have a thought, you build physical matter into your brain. So when I am deconstructing this and I'm going back to the origin of it, did it originate with me? Something that I thought? Was it something that someone else said? If we're trying to remember that we have to establish credibility, what I need to know is that just because something feels right doesn't mean that it is right. And so the only way that I can establish that credibility is to, once again, take it back to my standard of measurement. Somebody else may have spoken this over me, but are they my standard of measurement? Does what they've spoken, does what I've experienced, does what I believe line up with my standard of measurement? And if not, what's the problem? What adjustments need to be made? Everything in management comes back to that standard of measurement. Every nuance of a thought can be measured against or filtered through that standard of measurement, from its origin to its intent to its purpose. Not every thought in our life can be sparkly and fuzzy. Lots of healthy thoughts are hard. Okay, can I just tell you that? Sometimes it's just hard. The difference between a hard, healthy thought and a toxic, intrusive thought is their impact on my life, okay? In other words, what fruit does this produce? Sometimes I have hard thoughts. Sometimes I hear hard things. But what fruit is that producing in my life? From the strategy of self-awareness, I can examine what the fruit is in my relationships, what that fruit is in my mental, my emotional state, my behavioral patterns. And I can do this so that I continue to move forward in growth. The next strategy that we're going to look at is the strategy of practicing emotional granularity. Now, this is probably not something you've ever heard thrown around, and it's really not that complex. See, there's a time for disciplining our thoughts, and we talked about that, and okay, we've got to deconstruct, we've got to isolate, but then there's actually a time for expounding upon our thoughts. And this strategy of emotional granularity is centered around this expounding, okay, this expansion in our mind. Because simply put, emotional granularity is the ability to define with greater specificity what I'm feeling. In theory, all I'm doing is I'm increasing my emotion word bank, my emotion vocabulary if you will, okay? As we learn to increase our emotional vocabulary, we enhance our brain's ability to process through those emotional experiences, okay? Think of words as tools for your brain. So the more words that you have to describe how or what you're feeling, the more tools that your brain has access to process through that experience. Let me give you an example. Let's say that on my way into work that I was driving and somebody cut me off, okay? And this was rude and this made me angry. And I said a couple choice words to this person and I went on about my way. Well, then I get into work and I get an alert from maybe it's my bank letting me know that somebody has hijacked my identity. And not only have they hijacked my identity, but they've drained my bank accounts. And not only have they drained my bank accounts, but they've maxed out my credit cards. And I'm getting notice after notice after notice. And this makes me angry. Now, arguably, these two experiences are going to produce varying intensities of anger. But if I have a greater emotional vocabulary, a deeper emotional granularity, I'm going to have more tools to process through the varying intensities that I'm experiencing. And we go through this all day, but limited emotional granularity can predispose us to emotional hijacking because everything makes us angry. And we don't have the proper tools to process through even the smallest emotional disruptions. And so help yourself out by growing in the depth and richness of your emotion word bank. This is one of the easiest strategies, requires the least amount of effort, but I promise you the return on the investment here is well worth it. So enhance that, increase that. We've got a couple more here. The next one we're going to look at is creating rhythms of work, rest, and play. Now remember, we talked about some of these are reactive, right? This is very much a proactive strategy. Okay, we are terrible at self-care. And when we tend to think of self-care, it's more self-indulgence that leads to further deterioration of mental and emotional health. So this is the intentional and proactive self-care self-care that we're going to look at, okay? In general, we as people, we struggle with balance. Maybe it's because we don't know what we're supposed to be balancing. We try to balance too much, or we just don't understand the need for balance. We think we can do all things, we can be all things. It's a farce. And it's these demands that we put on ourselves in our lives, our emotional capacity, our mental capacity, sometimes even our physical capacity, they are unrealistic, they're unsustainable. Everything about our divine design and calling was created with rhythms in mind. That's why I said you need a rhythm of work, rest, and play. Work, rest, and play. The element of work, let's start there. This existed from the very beginning. God created man, put him in the garden, and he said what? He said, I want you to work it, I want you to keep it. In Genesis chapter 2, we read about that. The garden provides the picture of this provision that we've all been entrusted with to steward. It looks different for all of us. Work looks different for me than it does for you. Work looks different for the stay-at-home mom than it does for the CEO of some finance corporation. But we've all been given a measure of work that we have to steward. Work that we do should never be tied to a dollar amount, a level of education, fame, notoriety. All work is valuable, and the way that we steward that work is an act of worship unto the Lord. But because we're designed for rhythms of work, we're also always going to need rhythms of rest. Every part of your being, body, soul, and spirit, proves that we were created with rest in mind. The fact that your physical body becomes fatigued after it's been exerted, your daily need for sleep, the time it takes your muscles to recover from a workout, these are all primitive proof of the physical demands, the physical need for rest. Our soul needs rest. Remember, your soul is your mind. It's your will. It's your emotions. Your mind recovers and regenerates as you sleep. Sleeping is necessary so that we can filter through some of those thoughts. It's where we build memories. It's where focus is regenerated. Mood is regulated. Sleep is not the only form of rest for your mind, though. Limiting sensory stimulation. We're so overstimulated. We feel like we always have to be entertained or doing something. Removing all of those activities and screens and taking time to let your soul rest, to simply let your mind wander in creative, exploratory ways is wildly regenerative and restful for your soul, even your spirit. The part of you that communes with God, honors and celebrates rest. We do this through honoring and protecting, establishing, really. We need to establish and then protect a Sabbath. A Sabbath is a 24-hour period where we cease from all work, paid or unpaid. Putting a Sabbath on your calendar and then planning for it will be a significant deposit in your life. So we need work, we need rest, but we also need some fun. Okay, it's true that, again, we tend to not know the balance here, but having fun, believe it or not, is necessary for thriving survival. When we are having fun or laughing or doing things that put us in a good mood, your brains release chemicals that increase your brain activity. We can learn better, we can connect with people easier, we can think deeper. All of this happens from having fun. These experiences in your brain, these are not just because we are, flesh hedonistic, seeking, desireful creatures. That's not what it is. These are wired into our design by our Creator. God says to eat, drink, enjoy the fruit of your labor. He never intended for us to live lives void of pleasure. He simply provided boundaries found within our standard of measurement, because in his omniscience, he knows exactly how much is too much. It's easy to fall out of rhythms in these areas, right? We all know the workaholic. We all know the lazy glutton. And so really finding a balance between all of them is so key in this area. It is worth saying that different seasons are going to have different demands, right? Whether you're a new mom, whether you're starting a new job, whether you're in a transitional season, you've been laid off, that the rhythm will look different, but even being aware of that, being intentional about that, and once you notice that you're out of rhythm, doing what's necessary to get back into it. Once they're established, create systems to protect them. That's an added layer of that proactive management. Let me just give you some practical systems, practical structures. This is going to include things like, again, we talked about the Sabbath. Pick one day, put it on your calendar, and try to keep that consistent. Block out daily time for spiritual disciplines, things like getting in your word, praying, having regular times of even just personal worship, okay? Setting up and honoring screen time limits. I am very big on this, right? I give myself like minimal time on social media. Sometimes I don't even use it. And so I'll tell people, well, just set apps or set limits on your apps. Well, I do, but then I just hit ignore. And so, listen, if you're going to set up those limits, you have to honor them. This is about being a good manager. Turn off you guys, your phone is one of the biggest disruptors of these rhythms. And if you've ever been in a conversation with someone and your wrist starts vibrating or the phone in your pocket starts vibrating, you easily recognize how that rhythm has now been disrupted, because now I've just gone from having a conversation to you to whoop, and I'm over here. and it throws these things off balance. So simple things like with your phone, turn off all non-essential notifications. You don't need to be notified every time Fox News has a new update or ESPN drafts a new player. Those things they're fine. They're there for your pleasure, right? But you go to them on your terms. You don't let them dictate the terms. So things like that. These are structures, systems that we don't think about that are small and simple, but will go a long way. Create a 10 to 12 hour do not disturb block on your phone. Plan annual vacations. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't have to be a millionaire, but plan those times to get away. Plan monthly dates with the people that matter most to you, whether this is your significant other, kids, family, friends, whoever that is. Those are investments too into your soul. Try new things. Try new things. This is part of that, having fun. Get outside of what's comfortable and familiar. Protect healthy sleep habits. Sleep is one of the number one predictors and influencers of health in every area of our life. And so protect. The average person, and I have met some weird anomalies, but the average person needs about 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single night. You can't catch up on it, right? We like this idea that I'm catching up on sleep. It's not how your body works. So try to protect habits in that area. Exercise. Try and exercise 3 to 4 times a week. Again, you don't have to join a CrossFit gym. Take the dog for a walk. Do something. Go up and down the stairs 25 times. Something. If you exercise 30 minutes a day consistently, some kind of physical activity, I promise you, you will see a return on that. The goal is not to have a six-pack in your 50s. The goal is health, right? Healthy, not normal. Create an 80-20 rule for eating, okay? 80% of the time, we're eating real food where it's not processed. 20% of the time, there's 20% for allowance, right? For indulgences. Drink half your body weight in ounces of water daily. These are all part of this rhythm of work, rest, play. These are things that your body needs in order for those rhythms to be succinct. We've got 2 more here. We're going to cultivate gratitude. This is our next strategy. Cultivate gratitude. I don't care what self-help book or podcast or TED Talk you've ever listened to. Gratitude is on every single one of them. And again, this is one of those things that's indiscriminate to every people type. But what's crazy about gratitude, you guys, is every single research study that they show or that they've done shows conclusively how big of an impact this make. Every single psychological study ever published, like that's a reliability rate off the charts, shows that gratitude practiced consistently promises positive results. It's proven to decrease depression, decrease anxiety. People who are grateful are less angry, they manage their stress more effectively, and they're more generous. They sleep better, they experience less physical pain, they have better immune systems, and they enjoy healthier relationships. These are not hypothetical findings. Again, conclusively, every single study they've ever done shows these same results. It's scientifically proven. Again, this is one of those super simple, does not take a lot from you. And what's crazy, or the interesting part, is that this was in God's word, right? Throughout scriptures, over 100 times we're told to be thankful, to be intentional about expressing that gratitude. It's like God knew what the return on that would be. Cultivating gratitude starts with the conscious decision, okay? Just what do I have right now to be thankful for? It's not a one-time thing. It's not reserved for the month of November when everyone likes to do their daily gratitude. This should be a daily discipline every single month of the year. Again, cultivating this takes time and consistency, but just start somewhere. Start with a gratitude journal, whether you have an actual paper journal or you do it in your phone. If you were to map out 3 things that you are thankful for. And here's the thing, because I've learned that just writing an innocuous or mindless list is not as effective as, here's 3 things I'm thankful for, here's why I'm thankful for them, because that makes you really engage with this discipline. But if you start that and you do that consistency, give it 30 days and see that it doesn't make a difference. So this is, again, one of those super practical, but also really manageable strategies that all of us can start today. And our last one that we're going to talk about in today's class is this idea of glancing back, but focusing forward. Glancing back, but focusing forward. You'll remember that when we walked through strategies for self-awareness, one of the things that we employed was the idea of going back in order to move forward. The goal of moving back, again, is for context. It's for awareness. It was never to move back there, right? Now, as we're progressing and in our awareness, we've become aware of a lot of those things. I don't have to necessarily forsake all of that. I'm going to glance back, but my focus is going to be forward. As we've become aware of, the family generation stuff, the patterns, the behaviors, the tendencies, all the things that made a name for themselves in our lineage, we did that so that we could learn and grow from them. Those things definitely influenced our journey. But now we have to choose to manage our lives from this point on. And we get to determine what influences our future. Isaiah 43, the people of God are challenged to forget the former things and to not dwell on the past. Your past is a part of you, but the more that you disentangle yourself from those toxic habits, those unhealthy patterns, the more time and really energy and focus that you should have to spend focusing forward. Even good things of the past, because, a lot of times it's like, oh, I just want to go back to this. Listen, that will hinder growth. That was always meant to simply be a springboard for our future. Growth is forward moving. So the more emotionally intelligent that we're becoming, the more time that we're going to spend focusing on the present and dreaming for the future. The Lord goes on to tell his people in Isaiah 43 that the reason that we can't dwell on the things from the past is because if we do, we're not going to recognize the things in the here and the now. He says in Isaiah 43 verse 19, he says, listen, I'm doing a new thing. It springs up. Don't you perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness, streams in the wasteland. Listen, this is true for all of us. God wants to take us places that we've never been, to see and experience things that we've never seen or experienced before. But he can't do that as long as we remain shackled to the past. Do we need to become aware of those things? Yes. But do we need to stay continued in bondage to them or hindered by them? Absolutely not. And as we are journeying through the skills of emotional intelligence, if we find ourselves stuck in an issue from the past, that is not a death sentence. All we've got to do is implement some of these strategies for management, make adjustments so that we can ensure that we are operating with accuracy in our lives. We're going to glance back so we can see how far we've come, but we're going to focus forward so that we can achieve our potential. Again, like I told you in the beginning, this is not an exhaustive list. There's so many ways that we can manage the things that we're becoming aware of, that we can regulate. But I promise you, if you begin to apply, starting with, I really need to take serious this idea of identifying what my standard is and commit to a comprehensive understanding of that, and then learning to make adjustments through that, the return that you will see on this, you will become a better manager as the days progress. I just want to encourage you in it. Don't expect to see results overnight, but don't quit. The Bible says in Galatians 6 that if we don't grow weary in well-doing, if we don't quit, that at just the right time, we'll reap a harvest of blessing. So wherever you're at today, wherever you're starting, whatever you've become aware of, just commit to this discipline and see that you don't see that harvest of right living, see that return on the blessing. I'm excited for your journey, and I can't wait as next week, we're going to move out of personal competencies and into social competencies, and you'll be excited for what it has to hold. Until then.
Here at Dream City Omaha, we're all about helping people discover Christ, recover identity, and uncover purpose. Please explore our past videos, sermon series, and online classes, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.